11D Life podcast.
What's up, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of 11D Life. I could not be happier that you are here. I kind of feel like I've been out of the saddle for a little bit because I feel like for the past 3 or 4 episodes, we sort of do what's called banking episodes. So we go ahead and do a whole bunch of episodes at one time so that we sort of free up ourselves. So we sort of free up time to be able to work on other things so it doesn't feel like we're having to produce a podcast every single week. And so what I'll do is normally like bank these episodes, do the interviews, do whatever the content of the episode's going to be. And then I'll come back and whatever's happening that week, if there's updates that need to be made, I normally put those in the intros and outros of the podcast. And it gives me a little bit of time to sort of live with the conversation and see the parts of it that I really liked or didn't like, or ways in which I embarrassed myself, and that's life. And I'm just sitting here living it. So anyway, we have some announcements to make for this week's episode, and I'm going to go ahead and get them over with as quickly as possible so that we can get into the episode itself. A huge shout out to everybody over at the 11D Life Facebook page. We have some brand new members. Phoebe, I see you out there. Sarah, Sergio, Macy, Sarah, lots of Sarahs, Christina, Jared. Man, welcome to the 11D Life Facebook group. It is so cool to see you guys out there. Okay, next on the list, the 11D 2018 karaoke competition. We have already received some entries for this and some requests to extend the deadline. So the official deadline is over, but we are extending it for just a few more weeks until some special folks who have asked for extensions get their submissions in, and I can't wait to share the winner with you soon. Hey, huge high fives to everybody who is checking out the new 11D7 B-Sides EP. You guys are just saying the kindest things about it, and I thank you so much for that. Coincidentally, I've also gotten some hate mail for it, and I think that would be a really fun episode to dive into, reading some more hate mail sometime here in the near future. So stick around, hit the subscribe button so that you don't miss an episode, because it's only going to get more fun. Hey, while we're on the subject of new episodes, this is your official 11D cattle call for show ideas. Part of what we try to do is make the experience of the podcast and the music that we make and everything that sort of has to do with 11D7, Rock Candy, yada yada. We take very seriously the cues that we get from you guys. So if you have a show idea that you want to share with us, something that you want us to do on the podcast, if there's a specific person you want us to get on the show, if there's a specific song that you want covered, if there are questions or answers or commentary or anything that you have, maybe you're sitting on the other side of the podcast right now listening to me talk and you're like, Matt, I only ever get to hear you say words and I never get to respond. Man, I don't want you to feel like that at all. Please let us know what your thoughts and feelings and suggestions and everything are about the show, because we really do take seriously pivoting in the direction that serves everybody who listens to the show, because we value your attention span, because there is 1,000,001 other things that you could be dedicating your time and energy and effort into, and we feel very honored that you spend time with us, with our band, with our music, with our podcast. And so we want to make sure that we're doing right by everybody. So this week, in honor of the B-Sides EP coming out last week, I thought that it would be fun to dive into this brand new version of Appalachian Wine. I've gotten a few requests to sort of dig into the actual audio session for this song and maybe talk a little bit about the process and what our thinking was going into it. And so you guessed it, this is going to be a solo button episode. We are going to hit the solo button on Appalachian Wine and cover it as in-depth as we possibly can in one sitting. So what we'll do is go ahead and play the official track as it appears on Rad Science B-Sides, for those of you who are new to the show and may not be familiar with the song. And then we'll dive into the actual session for the track and tear it apart and hit the solo button on all of the different wild and wacky sounds that kind of make up this song. So anyway, without further ado, let's live a little bit of 11D life.
Father Time. Fell in love over Appalachian wine. Hit a rough spell and almost lost their minds. Raised a little hell before they fell in line.
So that was Appalachian Wine. That was our rad science version. So we've talked about this song before on the show. We did this song kind of as a fluke, as a joke originally on this EP that we put out called Attack of the Mountain Medley. We had always wanted for a long time to sort of redo it in a fashion that was more sort of indicative of what we actually do live or how we actually approach songs in the studio. And so, yeah, that's what we ended up doing for this one. And there's some really juicy little guitar bits that are happening in the track too. Our friend Price Stevens that you guys have probably heard on the show before. Much love to him because he came and spent the whole day in the studio with us just goofing off and trying out some different things and trying out different guitars and sounds and sort of filling the track out that way. But the first thing I think we should get into with this song in particular is that, you know, there's these parts of the song that sort of repeat probably 3 or 4 times throughout the course of the song, and a lot of it is sort of the backbone of what the track is. So these parts that happen in the intro and the chorus are pretty much the same thing throughout the song. And I think when I was working on the track itself, trying to figure out what was going to be sort of the sonic brand that carried the song through everything, through to the end, I felt myself sort of gravitating to a lot of these really natural sounds, that sort of this melding of sort of EDM programming and chord structure and marrying that with some very acoustic sounding sort of samples. So I'm going to dig in first to the drums on the intro of this song. So one of the first things that you hear is this part. Cool. So what we have happening right there is a kick that sounds a little like this. So really low, kind of pillowy. It's got a lot of weight and depth to it. And then we have this clap track over top of that. Yeah, and then over top of that, we have a hi-hat track. I didn't even know that little boop was in there. That's fun. Okay, so on top of that, we also have a snare track that is sort of doubling what the claps are doing. I'll let you guys hear that. Here's just that snare track. I love that snare sound. Just really fun, happy, snappy. Yeah. Okay, cool. So we also have these crashes that I'm quite fond of because I feel like they sound kind of robotic, but they have a fun little juice in them. Yeah. Like an old 808 maybe mixed with something else. But the one thing that I feel like sets this loop apart, you know, like we're not breaking any new ground with the way that this loop is programmed, but underneath all of that, we also have a lot of these more acoustic samples, like what I was talking to you guys about. So there's a loop that is comprised of a lot of other drum sounds, and I will solo that for you right now. And it's playing over top of all these other drums that we've been listening to. And this is what it sounds like. Yeah. So it's a little crunchy, actually. It's got this kind of a lo-fi vibe to it. But when you start throwing the kick in there over top of this loop, and then the claps, and then the hats, and then our other snare, and then our crashes. Feels really fun. Yeah, I'm really digging that. So anyway, I thought this was pretty sweet. Now this song was already written, but for everybody who's listening to the show right now, and you are a songwriter, and I know that there's a lot of you out there that are listening, and you are songwriters. One of the things I love to do is not getting overwhelmed with endless amounts of options. So a lot of times I will come into the studio, and let's just say, for instance, I started getting the ideas together to write a song like this. Sometimes just dragging a loop into your DAW, into Pro Tools, and working with that loop. Don't try to build. I mean, I went through the time and the effort after the fact to sort of build all of these drum sounds and pick the ones that I wanted and make sure that everything was right. But initially, when you are trying to get the ideas out, let the song win. Get the ideas for the song out. Get your melodies out. Get your vibe. Get your feel. Get your attitude out first, and then go back and make adjustments as necessary. Because the important thing is that you allow yourself to get into a groove, into a flow, into a state of being able to write and get all of your ideas that have to come from a human out of you. And then we can go back and sort of meld with the computer and get really sciencey about the samples that we're using and moving this and that around, or recreating the loops that we originally dragged in. But it is so helpful to just be able to drag in a loop and start writing to the loop, because you've already had some other ancillary decisions made for you in that loop. So you can just kind of focus more on these other things that we're talking about. So over here on the after that intro part, we also have these bass sounds happening that are making up a pretty big part of the weight of the track. So I'm going to solo these bass parts for you here first. Man, that just makes me want to pimp a ride. So this is what we would call a sub-bass track. And the interesting thing about this is that because of the key of the song that we landed in, those last two notes in this loop, a lot of times people can't hear them because they're actually too low. You can kind of hear the high-end information happening. You know that there's a note that is happening, but the frequencies are too low for a lot of speakers and sound systems. So we double that with what we call a high bass or a top bass. And that sounds a little bit like this. And I think that this was made with a Prophet 5. It sounds kind of Prophet 5-y. And so you can really tell what the notes are with that one. So when you add these two together, you kind of get this massive bass sound. Yeah. And so when we start throwing this loop and the kicks and the claps and the hats and the cymbals and the crashes, we have this whole song is basically comprised of 72 individual tracks. So there's a lot to work through in this song. That might be a little overkill, but here's what we end up with just the bass and the drums. So that's really simple. And I think I took a little bit of a liberty in writing a melody part over top of this. You know, you have your lyrical melodies and you have your musical melodies. And a lot of times I love how they just kind of play together in a nice fashion. And so we have a lot of other instruments sort of happening, holding up that musical melody line. So I'm going to solo one of them for you here. This is a kalimba sampled into a synthesizer, and it sounds a little bit like this. I love that sound. I think it sounds so fun and cool. It's got a three-dimensional quality to it. It feels like it has 1 foot in the real world and 1 foot out in unicorn land. I just kind of love that. So we layer that with another one that is playing the exact same part, but it's on a totally different synthesizer, and it sounds a little bit like this. Awesome. And then we also layered that again with another synthesizer that this track is labeled hard piano, and it's playing the exact same thing as the other two tracks that you heard, but it's got a little bit of a different timbral quality to it. It sounds like you're getting ready for like any dance party in the 90s. So there's that. So all together, these three sounds combined give us this guy. Man, it just has power, it has weight, it has depth to it. All of the different sort of timbres of sounds are all kind of playing together off of one another. And man, it just makes me really happy. So underneath all of that, we also have a track called Brass Pad. And I'm going to play that one for you from the beginning here. So it's just slowly opening up. Yeah. And then we have another pad underneath that called Massive. A little more angelic, a little more vocal. Yeah. Oh, man. I love that. I love that so much. So, we also have this little track down here that's kind of fun. And I'm pretty sure I tracked this on the Juno. And that's what this little guy sounds like. Just a little beep off in the distance. And if you didn't know it was there, you might not even know that it was there. That's so stupid. Of course, Matt. Say the same thing twice. So we also have our foot in the real world, which is these orchestra tracks, which are live orchestras that are tracked into samples that you play on your keyboard. And that's what, over top of all those things that we just heard, here's what's happening with the live orchestra samples. Just a very staccato sort of violin sound there. And then underneath that, we have a harmony track for that. Those two together. Oh man, I love that. I don't know why it makes me so happy. It reminds me of watching commercials as a kid. It reminds me of like the Where's the Beef commercial. Okay, here we go. I'm old. This is an octave lower orchestra track. And then we also have a little orchestra pad happening down here. That's what this sounds like. So all of the orchestra parts together sound a little something like this. And if we throw our drums in, yeah, I love this so much. I love making music. It's my favorite. Okay, so all together, all of these parts, the synthesizers, the orchestra, the drum samples, the loops, the bass, all of it kind of culminates into this. Cool. So that's the intro, and you're going to hear all of these tracks basically playing that exact same thing underneath the chorus of the song. And so it's a little bit different than the original version. That those melodies that the synthesizers are playing are a little bit different than the orchestrated melodies of the original track. But we thought, you know what the hell? It's our song. We can make those kinds of calls and put a new spin on it and make it something that sounds a little bit more fun. So the idea idea going into the first verse of this song was that you have all of these different things happening. You have so much depth. You have so many different things happening at one time in this intro, and you know that you're going to call back to it whenever we get into the chorus. So why don't we make the verses really thin so that we have a bigger dynamic range, so that we have a journey to go on sonically whenever we are, as a listener, when we're listening to the song. So we come out of that intro into this. I'm going to mute these vocals really quick so we can come back to them later. Just a kick and a clap. And we have our pads underneath all of it. Okay, cool. So one of the things that we actually did pull in from the original song is this violin sample that you hear going into the second part of the first verse. I just thought that was such a fun little kind of like halfway creepy, halfway playful sort of a thing. So that is a direct track that we pulled in from the original version of Appalachian Wine, just to kind of harken back to that original vision for it. Awesome. So right now what we have happening is we have our brass pad and our massive pad, and they're doing this. All those weird little dips that you're hearing in volume are because they're sidechained to the kick, which means every time that the kick triggers, it will duck the volume of these tracks just a little bit. For those of you who are your own producers and work in a lot of electronic stuff, you are very familiar with sidechaining more than likely. And so we also have this orchestrated track underneath that you probably wouldn't know about if I hadn't pressed the solo button on it, but it just seemed to kind of fill it out a little bit more. Here's what really makes this part super fun, and this is what Price Stevens contributed to it. It was a really simple idea. It was just playing the actual root note of what's happening, but he got this really cool sort of drony, verbed out guitar tone that maybe he's even known for, and then just kind of toss this on top of there. And here's what this sounds like. I love it. I love it because everything else happening in the track is super sample based. It's electronic instruments. I want to say fake. It's not necessarily fake. It is off in electronic land, and there's something about pushing air through an amplifier and somebody actually playing a guitar over something that sort of puts you another foot back in reality. So here's what we get. Just having that happening in the background there, I feel like adds so much. So yeah, we have this little transitional spot. This would be within the context of the song, probably the pre-chorus. It's really simple. Basically what I ended up doing was the kick actually is doing something interesting. The kick stops doing its original pattern and kind of moves into more of a heartbeat pattern. So that's what we hear when we do this. Here we go. And then I threw a loop over top of that. So this loop that goes over top of that kick sounds a little something like... Yeah, I don't know why I'm feeling it's super vibey, and it makes me happy when I hear it. The other two things that are happening down here are programmed on the Prophet, and this is the synthesizer version of the Prophet. So it's a really inexpensive synth, and it's one of my favorite ones. I talk about it all the time on here, probably too much without getting paid for it. But we have these two parts that were programmed. This one is a little plucky, and it's doing a higher sort of melody line. And then underneath that, we have a bass synth playing this part. Cool. That filter kind of opens up there. So here's what they sound like together. Just a melody and a bass part, but then all together with the kick drum and the heartbeat sort of pattern, we get this really cool little signal to the listener that, hey, things are about to change. We're about to move into a different realm. So I also heard this little guy. This was just made on the SH-101, I'm pretty sure. Just a little... It's a fun little bit to remind you that we're still all robots. Yeah, cool. So we come out of that into everything that we just heard in the intro. Awesome. Now, one of the other cool things that also happens here is I grabbed a cut. So whenever Price came into the studio for this day that we hung out and just sort of goofed off on guitar a little bit, I would just grab everything that was happening. I was just had the record button on the entire time. And one of the things that you'll find whenever you're producing music is it doesn't matter if you think it sounds good or bad. You never know when you're going to get these fun little bits that just kind of inspire you a little bit, or that move the track forward, or that make the track feel a little more distinctive and kind of add a really human flavor to it. And one of the things that I found throughout the course of our session was this little guy. Just a little sound I'm pretty sure that he had made, and it probably didn't even sound like that to begin with. It sounds like it's been reversed, but you can hear it in this transitional spot. So little things like that just make the track more interesting to listen to, that feel more engaging. And if everybody disagrees with me on that, that's cool too. It makes it fun for me, so I can speak for myself in that situation. Let's take this opportunity to go ahead and hear the one thing that we haven't heard yet, which is the chorus vocals. The chorus vocals, as you guys have heard me talk about a lot, I just love stacking the hell out of some vocal parts. So here's what you're hearing primarily in the chorus of this song. You have our leads that are taking place right here.
Mother Earth and Father Time fell in love over Appalachian wine.
So that's two of me. Here's one of me.
Earth and Father Time fell in love over Appalachian wine. Hit a rough spell and almost lost their minds.
Cool. So we have those two vocals happening. All of that is doubled and quadrupled with a stack of 6 more of me. Here's what that sounds like.
Earth and Father Time fell in love over Appalachian wine. Hit a rough spell and almost lost their minds. Raised a little hell before they fell in line.
Cool. So that's me singing a total of 8 times the same line over and over again. We also have these little guys down here, our mid harmonies. Here's what they sound like. And this is a stack of 8 more of me singing a mid harmony part.
Time fell in love over Appalachian wine. Hit a rough spell and almost lost their minds. Raised a little hell before they fell in.
Cool. And then I have another harmony part down here. That's another 8 of me. So what is that for? Well, that's a 16 of me all at one time. So here we go.
Time fell in love over Appalachian wine. Hit a rough spell and
Yeah, so here's the high harmony and the mid harmony together.
Time fell in love over Appalachian wine. Hit a rough spell and almost lost their mind.
So here it is with everybody all at one time, the melody and the two harmonies.
Mother Earth and Father Time fell in love over Appalachian wine. Hit a rough spell and almost lost their minds. Raised a little hell before they fell in line.
There you go. So that's all the naked vocals with verb, of course. With lots of verb. So then we head back into our second verse. Here's what the vocals sound like in that little guy.
Fire came out with a restless soul that only got worse as he got older, till finally he got too hot to tame. Time said, son, I know it's hard, but you're breaking your mama's heart. And fire looked up through tears that made the rain.
So that's what's going on there. And then after that, we have a few things that are different in this verse. We have this fun little plucky guy happening down here.
Fire came out with a restless soul that only got worse as he got old.
So here we go. So we're listening to this, and then I'm going to mute everything except this one track happening in the background.
Fire came out with a
It's just a little plucky track made on the Juno.
time said, son, I know it's hard, but you're breaking your mama's heart. And fire looked.
And so we also, on this second verse, to kind of keep forward motion and more movement happening, we also took some orchestra samples from the original Appalachian Wine. And here's what we got here. So this was the original musical melody that was happening in the first Appalachian Wine, and I thought it sounded really cool when we gave it a totally new context within this song, just holding up verse 2 and making it sound a little more interesting. So we have our cellos happening, and then on top of that we have our Juno plucks. It all feels like they're kind of racing towards the next part of the song. There's a little track in here that didn't get turned up super hot in the final mix, but I thought it was kind of fun. And it's basically this little chord part that's happening over top of everything that you just heard. I'm pretty sure that was made on the Juno as well. Yeah, so here's what all that sounds like together.
Said, son, I know it's hard, but you're breaking your mama's heart. And fire looked up through tears that made the rain. He said, why is it everything I love I set aflame?
So we talked about grabbing these fun little bits of guitar during that session. Here's another one that I just kind of grabbed that I'm pretty sure was a mistake, and I ended up throwing it as a transitional piece out of verse 2 into the second chorus. Here you go. Just kind of sounds like a weird guitar plane crashing into the ocean, but it worked really well right here as a transitional piece.
Mother Earth and Father Time fell in love.
Cool. And so that little whoop whoop that you heard there was actually a reversed loop. Yeah.
Love over Appalachian wine.
So the next thing that we have happening in this song that we'll go over is the bridge. And the bridge has probably some of my favorite sounds in it, and it's just the most simple. It might even be border on uninteresting, but there's something about the way that these sounds came out that I really loved. So here we go. Yeah, whenever we start to head into the lyric, and time and earth.
And then time and earth fell on their knees and prayed, dear God, oh, can't you see? The fire's too hot, the wind's too cold, and loving them is gonna kill us both. And God reached down and took their hands, dried their tears, then smiled and said,
yeah, so what we have happening here is this variation on a loop. And that's just parts of a loop that I chopped up to do what I wanted them to do. And then the kick kind of happens in there as well. And so my favorite part of this has got to be this pad track that's happening. I'm going to solo that for you right now. So this is just really slight variations in chording, and it kind of grows over time. And then it has these little guys on the left and right of it. And then a piano comes in here. I'm sorry, an orchestra part. And underneath all of that, we have another prophet sort of holding up the booty of the song. And throw our pad back in there. We throw our beeps back in there. And you just end up with this really fun, moody sort of thing. Kind of has this interesting sort of longing feel to it. And it always sort of blows my mind that these are computers. These are things with microchips in them. Just tiny little brains that make these noises and make these sounds, and they come together and they evoke emotion out of it. They can create a feeling, a sense of longing, a sense of desire, a sense of feeling lost, or a feeling of love or affection for something. It just, I don't know, to me, that really is true magic. That somebody can make something that when a human touches it, all of these different facets of humanity just come pouring out of it. And man, I love that. I love that so much. So coming out of that part of the song, the bridge, we come into our last chorus.
Mother Earth and Father Time fell in love over Appalachian wine, hit a rough spell and almost lost their minds, raised a little hell before they fell in line.
Man, so there you go. That is Appalachian Wine. Before we go, I'm just going to take all of these different stems that I have in the song and just play this chorus one more time, sort of throw everything over top of it and unmute all of it as it's happening and see if I can get to all of it in time. So here's the final chorus as we keep adding the instrumentation to it.
Mother Earth and Father Time,
Harmonies, drums, synthesizers, orchestra. There we go. So there you go. That is Appalachian Wine. And yeah, I'm not sure if I would change anything about the track, if I could go back and redo it. I kind of feel like this is a good snapshot of where I was at the time in what I was kind of into in that month and a half in the studio. Just, you sort of put these limitations on yourself where you think, well, the original track had all these acoustic guitars and it had all this very sort of stripped down vibe to it. And I thought, well, why don't we throw a lot of stuff at it? Why don't we make it sound as big as we possibly can? And then also sort of lean into this sort of hip hop bass happening with it. It's really simple but effective. And then kind of play around with the rhythms, play around with the drums a little bit. Let's do anything but just hook up the microphone with an acoustic guitar and strum our way through the track like we did with the original version. So staying away from the piano, not allowing ourselves to add any acoustic guitars to it. You force yourself to start thinking about the song in a different way. If you put those limitations on yourself, like, well, I can't use acoustic guitars, you'd be surprised what you'll come up with to sort of fill the space of that. Yeah, and that's part of one of the fun things about producing, about songwriting, about studio work, is just saying, man, I wonder what this would sound like if I did something totally different, if I reached for an instrument or for a plugin or for some keys that I don't normally listen for. Or maybe what if I try to express as much as I can in the rhythm track and then keep the root notes of the song as minimal as possible? What will it sound like when I start combining these things together? And what are the essential parts of the track that make it work? Does the song still sound like a song if I mute the kalimbas? Does it still sound like a song if I mute the bass? Do you still feel like you have a sense of home base and of belonging? Those are all kind of questions that we're asking ourselves as we're producing and as we're writing. I love digging into this kind of stuff, and I love the feedback that we get from you guys about it. If you have any questions, something about this song, about this track that I did not go over, please feel free to let me know your thoughts, and I will be happy to try to address it for you. Most of all, a huge thank you to everybody who is listening to our songs, who is hitting subscribe on Spotify, who's subscribing to the podcast, who is just enjoying 11D Land as much as you can, because we absolutely love making it a fun place for you guys to be and hang out. Thank you so much for letting me share my music with you and my thoughts and my words. It means a lot, and I may never be able to express entirely in its fullness just what it means to me and how much my quality of life is just something I never thought it could be, because I get to share my music with all of you. Anyway, I love y'all, and I will see you on next week's 11D Life. See ya.
11D Life is a production of Rock Candy Recordings.